Welcome to Town Talk, the official podcast of Summerville, South Carolina, where we bring you the latest news and incredible guests here in the town of Summerville. And today, I'm super excited to have a group with me. We're going to be talking about the EPA Brownfields Assessment Grant that the town of Summerville has just recently been rewarded. So first to start, we usually don't have a group, right? We usually it's a one-on-one episode. So I'm actually really excited. But bear with me because I don't usually have a group to deal with, so we're going to make it happen, though. So we're going to go down the line, right? I want you all to introduce yourselves to the community, humble yourself, talk a little bit about how you got here, and then what your roles are in this project. So we'll start from left to right, my left to right.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Thetyka Robinson, and I am the founder and chief strategist for the Asiko group. Our firm is a creative, strategic firm that activates the community through presence, voice, and action. I am born and raised here in Charleston. Actually, when I was younger, grew up over the hill, I would say, in Sangaree. So having the opportunity to work in the town of Summerville is really exciting to bring that full circle in my roots of where I'm from, and excited to engage the community around the project.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm super excited to have you here.
I'm Patrick Homan, work for Terracon Consultants. We're a environmental and engineering consulting firm. I'm a senior scientist there, been with Terracon for 9 years now. Originally from Pennsylvania, moved to Charleston about 9 years ago, and we will be the town's environmental consultant for this Brownfields grant.
Awesome. And where in Pennsylvania are you from?
Lancaster County.
Okay.
If you're familiar with that, so
okay.
maybe like an hour outside Philadelphia.
Okay, I'm from Erie, so
nice.
On the other corner.
Yeah, other corner, yeah.
Awesome. And then Jessi.
Jessi Shuler. I'm the Director of Planning for the Town of Summerville. I've been with the town since 2007. Worked my way up from planner position all the way to the Director of Planning. And I will be the town's grant director for this project. So I'm the main contact person for both Thetyka and Patrick. And just excited to move forward with this grant. It's been a long time we've been trying to get it, so happy to have it finally and get moving with it.
Now, I know this is a big deal. And to start, our listeners probably aren't really aware on what the EPA Brownfield Assessment Grant is. So to start, how would you best explain in simple terms what this grant is and what it does?
Yeah, I can start off. So this EPA Assessment Grant is essentially federal funding from EPA that the town has now since they're awarded the grant, and they use these funds to assess sites for environmental contamination, and that can include things like soil impacts, groundwater impacts.
Oh wow!
Asbestos in buildings.
Okay.
Kind of things like that. The grant's really used for a catalyst for taking these brownfield sites and redeveloping them.
Yeah.
So, and it also helps to remove any kind of environmental stigma or anything that kind of, we can talk about it later in some of the other questions, or kind of helps to remove any potential environmental stigma to allow for like redevelopment of these properties.
Oh, that's cool.
Things like that, yeah.
That's going to be really helpful for the community as a whole to really just kind of to do some assessment of different properties and see what could be, right? And then what, all that fun stuff. But, when it comes to like brownfields and maybe concerns for the community, what are some concerns when it comes to for the sake of the community?
So, I guess as far as brownfield sites go, really the definition of a brownfield site's pretty broad. It's really any site that could potentially have contamination associated with it. So these sites are usually, vacant, underused, or underutilized properties in the community. I think we've all kind of seen these properties. They're the ones that have been vacant for years. Maybe there's a structure on the site that is kind of dilapidated, just serving real no purpose in the community. Have the EPA definition of a brownfield site, which is a brownfields property, or a brownfield is a property where expansion, redevelopment, or reuse may be complicated by the presence or potential presence of hazardous substance, pollutants, or contamination. So, yeah, that's a really kind of broad, definition of pretty much a brownfield is any site where contamination could be at. So these are a concern for the community, first because they could pose a threat to the environment and the public health if left unchecked. Second, these properties are generally underutilized in the community and not serving a beneficial use, really.
Yeah.
And third, they're really just an eyesore. I kind of mentioned they're usually the sites that are vacant, kind of dilapidated, could be an old gas station, for example, that has been out of business for years or something like that.
Okay. So when it comes to, things, asbestos and stuff like that, how do these brownfields get, contaminants? Are you finding that it's specific type of old companies or buildings that cause it, or is it just because they're old buildings that were built with stuff that was not being built today? How does that work?
Yeah, so a lot of it is just kind of how they used to do things back 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Yep.
A lot of the, I guess textbook sites would be like your old gas stations that have underground storage tanks. A lot of those over years tend to have leaks, which cause petroleum impacted soil and groundwater. So there are certain, I guess, industries that would lead to a site being potentially contaminated or not. So gas stations are a good one. Old dry cleaners. Old, I guess, industrial facilities are a lot of times anywhere where they're kind of handling potential hazardous materials and kind of any, industry that could have leaks or potential leaks or things like that.
And that makes sense because, when the business closes down, it's not like they just, up and leave and, everything's gone, right? There's still going to be stuff that's left over, at least contaminant-wise, too. So it does make sense why that would be the case, even though a business moves on, they move to a different place, or they close down to kind of pursue a different lifestyle, whatever it may be.
Right.
But that doesn't mean the contaminants aren't going with them, you know what I mean?
Yep.
So that makes sense. So that's really exciting that we have an assessment coming into town to really look at those specific areas and see if and where those locations are at. Now, when it comes to Summerville, do we have any kind of idea of some of those brownfields locations at this moment?
So one, I just wanted to speak real quick to the importance of the grant to the community and why we wanted to apply for the grant. So as most people know, Summerville, there's limited land potential. We don't have a whole lot of open land left, particularly with wetlands and other environmental concerns. And so trying to think about sustainability and resiliency of the community, one thing we needed to look at was we are trying to do more infill development and redevelopment rather than continuing to sprawl outwards. And so unfortunately, with these brownfield sites, a lot of those sites don't get redeveloped because of that potential for contamination. Whether it actually exists or not, it's just the potential developers particularly don't want to have to potentially deal with contaminants.
Makes sense, yeah.
You know, not just because of the cost of cleaning it up, potentially cleaning it up, but also just the cost of finding out if they're there, the time that it can take to find out if they're there, and what would need to be done to clean them up. And so this is a really great opportunity for us to be able to get this funding to do the assessments, and so to have that initial knowledge base to know potentially, oh, this site is clean, it doesn't have to be cleaned up. That's one thing. It may look like it could be contaminated, but we found it's not actually contaminated, which makes it more, the ability to be redeveloped is a much greater potential for someone. And then, or if a site, we find that a site is contaminated, these are the steps that would be needed to clean it up. And so, you know, a developer would still potentially have the cost to clean it up, but they'd know what that timeline is. They'd know what they need to do and whether it would be worth it for them. And so redevelopment and be able to do that in these infill sites is really important for the town. One, because, you know, we don't have that much room to continue to go outwards, but two, redeveloping the areas. Most of these areas are in parts of the town that could really use some revitalization to help with economic development, and also just to help with the citizens in that area, to give them you know, better choices for you know, retail, restaurants, places to live, and also not be concerned about potentially contaminated sites next to them as well. So
it makes sense, and honestly, it seems like such a huge opportunity for Summerville, and that this grant is really gonna excel and really enhance Summerville as a whole. Because I mean, Summerville residents and our community and us here at the town, we love the history of Summerville. We talk about this. Summerville has history. Same, you know, with Charleston, it came back here as well. I mean, we have history, and with history are old buildings and old businesses that have. So it's important that to note that, because that's here. Even though you. In 2024, you're seeing apartment buildings go up and townhomes and new businesses. You got to remember, there's a ton of buildings here in the community that are not new,
Right.
but could be revitalized to bring enhancements to our community.
Right.
And so that's really exciting. I think a lot of our community members are going to be excited to hear that. When it comes to the grant itself, we were awarded $500,000, correct?
Correct.
And so how can we speak onto that amount and how that amount specifically is going to really help us with these assessments and what it's used for as well?
Sure. So as far as the town is concerned, you know, the $500,000 is certainly sounds like a whole lot of money, but when you get into the details of everything that needs to be done to, there's different phases of assessments, and you know, if your initial phase finds that there are potentially contaminates, the second phase is the one that generally costs the most money, and so you know, finding out exactly what it is that's contaminated and how deep it goes and whether it affects groundwater as well, and that sort of thing can be potentially very costly. And so obviously most of the grant money is spent on the consultants who do those assessments.
Makes
do the
sense, yep.
assessments, and of course the Asiko group that's helping us engage the community as well, which is a very important piece of the project. So that's primarily what most of the money is spent on. But we do, the EPA is wise enough to also include redevelopment planning as a part of the assessment grant, because it's one thing to be able to do the assessments, but then also being able to get the community involved in the potential redevelopment of those properties is important as well, to understand what, like I said earlier, about how the important of the redevelopment is to the surrounding property owners and the community. Understanding what they want to see there and what's needed and what could be on that property is also very important.
That's important, and I know we'll touch base on community engagement and impact later on, but so I know that's a big piece as well. And so it's nice to hear that grant is really why Terracon and was it the Asiko group?
That's right.
Yeah, you joined the team per se, right? Now, go in that direction with both Terracon and the Asiko group, what are the primary objectives of this grant, and what specific task will you guys be, tackling when it comes to this?
So one of the primary objectives of this grant is to work with the community members and leaders to further encourage the potential redevelopment of these brownfield sites throughout the community. So this will be done by completing community outreach initiatives like holding community meetings regularly. Creating a site inventory list of potential sites that could be assessed under this grant. And then, like we talked about, completing the assessment, so gathering the data, doing the soil and groundwater sampling to see if contaminants are present at a particular site. And then creating the reuse and planning documents to help aid in any potential, further redevelopment or cleanup that might be needed at a property. So we'll talk about, another main objective of this grant is to create a community-led steering committee or group for this grant. And so this will be a group of community members that will serve as the voice of the community for this grant. So they'll really be able to provide their input as to like what sites they think would be good candidates for assessment under this grant, what potential redevelopment options that they think would best serve the community, what redevelopment they would like to see that could most benefit the community by cleaning up these brownfields sites and things like that. So, we'll be forming that steering committee. So really encourage anyone in the community that's, interested in participating in this grant to consider joining that.
Oh, that's really cool. That's going to be exciting to have a committee to really work off each other, brainstorm, and collab to really make things happen, right? I love that. Now, what about the Asiko group? What are some of the objectives that y'all have when it comes to the project?
So our overall objective is to ensure that as many diverse voices as possible is at the table and in the room.
I love that.
So, and when I say diverse, I mean like anyone who considers themselves that Summerville is home, they work, they play, whatever that might be, that they have a voice and their voice is welcomed in the space. And so that with doing that creates an opportunity for us to reach as many people with a rippling effect, as well as bring awareness to the community. So there's not the after fact of, I heard about something, but I didn't know what was happening. Or I see all this testing. They're going to change the community. They're going to do all these things. But what's important for the community to know is this is not a development grant. This is a 4-year process. We didn't get to say that yet, but this is like a tortoise run.
Yeah.
This is like, this is not like something's going to happen in a year. And what I found by working with Terracon and other communities is that immediately people think of something that they see happening right now and think that it's going to impact that. Well, this is pure 4 years of testing, assessments, getting their feedback. So it's going to be a 4-year relationship with the community, with Terracon, with the town on assessing the whole community as a whole. And so as we do that, there'll be at the kickoff meeting that will be on April 22nd at 6 p.m. At
Rec Center.
Yep.
And so we welcome everybody to come out to that.
And I'll have that linked in the bio,
Yes.
so we'll make sure the community knows about that.
And I also want to say that, the Asiko group really does not do things in a cookie cutter way. We don't just check the box and say, okay, there's a meeting, let's tell people and do that. But we really get creative when we have the community together. So the goal is that the community comes, they bring the voice, and we make it a fun and engaging time. Like Brownfield seems like yawn, what is that about? But it actually is pretty exciting because it also takes people down like memory lane.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, like what buildings were, what the community was like, what transitioned to this building being dilapidated or abandoned, or the business closing down and no one going back in it. All of that brings up like opportunities to like just talk about stories and to really connect together again. And we had like new people when we were out at the Flower Town Festival who came through and they were like, well, I'm new. I was like, this is a perfect time for you to come because you'll get to meet new people and learn about the community that you live in. So that will be our ultimate goal. And as we go through the process, as Patrick said, this is not just a check-in and update, but this committee for people who really want to lean in and say, I want to be a voice, I want to help assess things and be a liaison for the community, it's a great opportunity for them to lean in and if they want to serve to do that. But even if you're not serving, we still do a great job of updating the community on a regular basis. So this is not Terracon Town Asiko led, this is community led. So we will be centering the community's voice at the center of everything.
And that's extremely important to note because when you bring the community and have them be the forefront of a certain grant or project, I think, in my opinion, it makes it stronger. It's the same thing with in a totally different project on my podcast, this podcast here. I make it known to the community, like, listen, let me know what you want to hear and what you want to see, different changes, because, the podcast is not for me, right? And the podcast is not for y'all, and it's for the community. And so I love that. Now, let's go into the community engagement a little bit and the impact on the community as well. Let's start with the impact. So, we talked about this. I think we touched base on this a little bit, but could we dig in a little bit more on like what the impacts and specifically environmental, economic, this will have on the community? Because I think it's pretty self-explanatory. If we find a brownfield location and we're able to revitalize it, and it could become a business that really helps our economy. That's pretty self-explanatory, right? But is there a way we can dig into that a little bit more for our community?
Kind of as I mentioned earlier, a lot of these sites just kind of get stuck in the, someone will look at it and potentially to redevelop it, find out there's the potential of contaminations, and so they'll decide it's not worth spending money. We're actually a couple of sites that we know that we're starting with on North Gum Street that's happened. We've had folks come in, ask us about the sites, have some potential redevelopment opportunities, find out about the environmental contaminants or potential for environmental contaminants and be like, oh, I don't have the time or the money to deal with that. I'm going to go find another site. And so it just kind of they get in that loop where it looks great and then they find out more and then they leave it alone. And so it's one of those, right? Yeah, they just kind of like, it's not worth my time or money to find out what I might potentially have to do on this site. And so it's kind of discouraging also for the folks in the surrounding area because they keep thinking, this eyesore may go away soon, and then they find out again that nope, it's not going to happen. So there's definitely that community impact where just I think also the citizens knowing that the town understands this and searched out this money, we received the money. And now we're using it to try and address those issues with these eyesores in the community, and find a way to make it easier for them to be redeveloped without just giving things away. That redevelopment, a lot of these sites, because they are in communities that need revitalization. If this site gets redeveloped, it could be a catalyst for other sites in that area. And so that's certainly something where, yes, this one site may only be, a couple $1 million impact, but if it's a catalyst for, 5 other surrounding sites in the area,
in a sense, right?
Then you're ending up with a $30 million impact, not just for the town, taxes wise, getting things back on the tax bill, which obviously allows us to provide better services to the citizens, but also those citizens not having that eyesore adjacent to them that gives their own property a higher value and also gives more pride in their community.
Absolutely.
That sort of thing, and also better trust in the government that we're trying to help them as well, not just do things that are seem like they're just good for developers or that sort of thing.
Yeah, you're correct. Even if you think about it this way, if I own a house and it's within this circle where there's a contaminated building, or site, I mean, obviously, my value of my home is not going to be as much as it would be if that site wasn't there. That's just straightforward real estate. I mean, it doesn't get much more black and white than that, right? And so, with the town coming in, assessing and looking at these sites, and then pushing for revitalization and for updates and fixing up of these sites. I mean, we're not only enhancing those sites, but like you said, it's a domino effect. We're enhancing other sites, and we're enhancing folks' homes or businesses, right? And I think that's what's really. I mean, I'm jumping the gun, but I think when you talk to the community, I think that's what a lot of things you're going to hear as well is the excitement behind that, right? Because I know if I had a home next to a location like that, I would be pumped.
Well, and one thing, the focus area for this grant is Census Tract 107, which is our LMI census tract, which is the low to moderate income census tract. So the idea was focusing on that area is an area that needs that kind of boost. Obviously,
it will bring that value to their businesses
correct.
and their homes.
Bring value to the businesses, the homes, and also show those folks that tend to feel left out of things, tend to feel like they're left behind. That no, we are focusing on this area and putting money into this area to let not just for redevelopment, but also to make sure that you have a health and safe. A healthy and safe community. Yeah. Because it's not just necessarily the redevelopment, but just making sure that it's you have a healthy, safe place to live, to work, to play. Because these sites, the contaminants can get into the water. They can get into the soil and cause potential illness and sickness. So.
And we don't need that here in Summerville.
No. So that's, I mean, obviously we're not like some areas that have these huge plants that used to be, like we don't have a huge amount of industrial, but these smaller sites can have just as many environmental impacts, just in a different, obviously smaller scale, but certainly still has the same negative impacts to the people who are immediately surrounding them.
And if we can eliminate that, then why not, right? It makes sense.
Can I add something?
Of course.
I know that, and this might not have been shared yet, and I don't know if this is public knowledge. I think it is, because it's definitely been said before in the past. But even though we go through this process, and it's the 4 years, and it's the recommendation to clean it up, there are opportunities for additional funding and grants to come behind that to offset, so it's not all falling on the developers, right? But it's, there's opportunities to get funding to come clean up the site after.
Yep, definitely. So, this grant is an assessment grant, so it's used to essentially assess sites. So we can only really gather data. We can't do any cleanup.
The cleanup aspect, yep.
It doesn't cover any costs for the redevelopment. I guess that comes later down the line. Like Thetyka said, there's grants we can apply for. Let's say there's a site has some impacts on it, soil impacts, or if we want to do renovation of a interior of a building, and let's say the building has some asbestos material that needs to be removed prior to that renovation, that asbestos would need to be removed or abated. And, depending on, the amount of asbestos and how big the building is, that can be, quite costly. So there are, other grants available that we can apply for to help that cleanup measure that's needed further on down the line.
That's amazing. I think that's important to note. And even these assessments are going to save potential businesses and stuff money from having. They can go from anyone who's interested in bringing a business here to Summerville. They can go and look, all right, with the potential sites, and they see, there's this site. It was assessed, and it has, some contaminants on it. But here are your steps from start to finish to make the site ready to revitalize and build on. And I think that saves a lot of steps in the process. Am I correct there too?
Yeah, a lot of steps and time. I mean, there's the cliche, time is money, but it is really for developers and development process. It really is. Time is money.
And that's important. And I think that aspect of it is going to be exciting for potential developers and stuff as well. Now, speaking on engagement, we touched base on this a little bit, but community engagement is going to be extremely important in the next 4 years from start to finish. I know we're just starting this project off. We're just kicking this off. So this is a long 4-year relationship and project that's going to be worked on and communicated with. And we just pushed out a start of a website. We'll continue updating it, but we'll have a web page on our website that talks about it and will continue to be updated and all that fun stuff. But there's different things we're going to do as well. We have the kickoff meeting, but can we just discuss a little bit of the importance of community engagement and public participation within this grant in the next 4 years?
So, one, we really can't have a true, authentic assessment, without having the community's voice. So I'm sure the town could say like, hey, here's some buildings, and they could, identify some things, but that's not, the town is obviously thinking of the community's best interests in all things they do. Yep. But it's nothing like having an individual come to the table, bring a story, point something out, and say, I think these are some places, where they can drive around town and point out some things, bring those back to the follow-up meeting and say, here's 5 locations that I'm thinking of. And not saying that wouldn't be on the town's list, but maybe it brings it to the town's attention. Like, exactly. I didn't even think about that, like, let's check it out. And Terracon could say, yeah, those are great locations. They're on the list. So it really does become a really interesting experience and opportunity for you to get to know your community again. Another thing is that, I don't know, it's something about starting from what something is now and imagining, like dreaming of what it could be. And that really does still come out of this, because that's part of the process for Terracon. So say the community says, here's some places, they come back and say, here's some places that they'd love to see assess. Terracon does that assessment, but then they can say, well, what would you want this to look like? What are these things? So to be a part of that process is really amazing. So I'll just also share that when we were at Flowertown, there's so many things that are happening there, so many amazing booths. But people who were local were actually stopping and reading the signs and coming over and engaging, pointing to the maps, pointing out where they lived, what they, the areas, having Jessi share, like, here's on Gum Street where we're looking at, or even if they fell right outside the census tract, but still advising them that you can still be a part of this. And if there's something that falls outside and it's a really significant location, then, we would love for you to bring that idea to the table. Yeah. So all I want to say is it's fun. It's a lot of fun. It really can be a lot of fun. The process itself. And I have seen that when people understand how their voice really matters and makes a difference in the process, they lean in more and come, they bring their homework. I love to give homework. They bring their homework back to the table. They engage with each other. For some, they've met different people that they haven't seen in a while or hadn't met before. They're able to have an opportunity to talk to their councilmen, the elected officials, because they're in the room as well. And then another part that we're specifically having is conversation with developers and business owners. So there's going to be a separate conversation that is bringing them to the table to understand why this is important and for their voice to be in the space too. So we're trying to make sure that we're being very intentional as we engage the community, whose voice needs to be there, who's missing, and if we don't have them there, how will that impact the process?
Yeah, so there is, in this specific, and when it comes to community engagement, there are types of groups that we're going to be trying to communicate to as well as the overall community. But you touched base on that a little bit, but if you can dig in some more of the type of groups, right? So you got the developers, you got the businesses,
right?
Can you dig into that a little bit more?
So first off the top is the everyday person that lives, breathes, works, engages in this community and calls it home. So that person is number one on top of the list. Next is if you're a nonprofit organization, DREAM is a big one that we needs to be there because they're already doing this work.
Absolutely.
Partnering with the chamber to ensure that the businesses and small businesses, larger businesses are aware that this is happening. As we talked about, the developers, working through churches, the schools to engage kids and parents, as well as Oh gosh, any restaurant owners, anybody who is in
Yeah.
the community who identifies in some way, shape, or form, homeowners, renters, doesn't matter who you are. If you call Summerville, and specifically in this census tract, your home, then we want your voice there. And if you're right outside of it, you'd be surprised. Like, I learned a lot with Jessi saying, like, oh yeah, you're outside there, but that still is a part. So I don't want anybody to feel like they're excluded because, oh, I'm not in the census tract, or I'm not a business, I'm not this, I don't own a home. That's okay, because you're contributing to something that will happen in 5 years from now or plus in the community. So having all those people there, and also doing intentional outreach. So this won't just be like this. Obviously, they'll have the website. We'll be engaging on social media. There'll be opportunities with partnering with other businesses,
Yeah.
going to the churches, making the announcements, sharing flyers at the schools
Yep.
for the parents. Any opportunities that we can engage with the community, we will do so. Any events that are coming up that looks like it makes sense for us to table to engage different authentic voices and get their attention to tell them about it, that's where we'll be. So we're really excited about it. We're going to make Brownfield exciting.
I love it. And to speak on that, we have the kickoff meeting coming up,
Yeah.
right? And so can we give a little teaser to the community and what they can expect for the kickoff meeting?
Sure. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, so like we said, it's on April 22nd
Yep.
at 6 p.m. at the Rollins Edwards Community Center, which is 301 North Hickory Street. Basically, folks will be able to learn more about brownfields, learn about how they can be engaged, hopefully get some folks who want to volunteer for the steering committee, to really be a voice for the community. Allow people to, obviously meet their neighbors, talk to other folks, and kind of see the area we're focusing on, and start to bring that community input, kind of, sites, like we said, we talked to a number of folks at the Flowertown Festival who were like, oh yeah, I'll definitely come. I like giving my own feedback.
Yes.
So told them, just bring any sites you can think of, whether it's contaminated or not. The more potential sites we have, the better we'll be able to go through and rank them and identify our priority sites. Because, like I said, there's only so many sites we can handle with this one grant, but there is the opportunity in the future to do additional assessment grants. If we find we've got enough sites that we can't fit them all into this grant, we can apply for another assessment grant. And once you've had one and shown that you've been productive with it, the opportunity to get another one is better than trying to get that initial grant. And then, of course, there's also the potential for cleanup grants afterwards as well, not just through the EPA, but also through the state as well. There's a state revolving loan fund. There's lots of funding that kind of opens up once you identify
amazing.
these brownfields and kind of get started in this process. Yeah. So it's like Thetyka said, brownfields can be kind of, folks are like, what's that? I don't want to deal with that. But I think once they understand the potential of what this can help our community and make Summerville a better place, then I hope folks will want to be involved.
Yeah, for sure. I remember when I was first approached about the Brownfields and building the website and working with y'all and the podcast. I was like, what is that? And so I went on Google, as everyone else does, and then I really just got behind it. I'm super excited to be somewhat a part of this process when it comes to communicating and helping communicate to the community, because there's a lot of importance to this, especially within our community. And so I'm extremely excited about it, and I definitely encourage folks to come to the kickoff meeting, Google, because it works, and then go check out our webpage as well, and we'll continue updating that webpage as time goes on. This is a 4-year process.
Yeah.
This is gonna take time, and when we talk about the next steps, right, it really is, there's gonna be steps and a lot of community engagement in those 4 years, but just like as Jessi touched on, it's the cleanup grants, and that's really the next step after this, is cleaning up and revitalizing. Now, outside of that, one thing I wanted to touch base before we go our separate ways is, other communities who have done this, right? What are some, from what y'all know, what are some success stories that you have seen and heard of from other communities that can kind of get our community just a
Yeah.
little excited about this whole project?
Well, I don't want to start a rivalry or anything, but Berkeley County is, they hit 1 year this month that we launched, and I worked with Terracon on that too. And if for anybody who doesn't know, but St. Stephen is a little T90 town right outside of Monk's Corner, and they take so much pride in that community, and so, or that town, I should say. And so they launched theirs a year ago, and you would have thought that you might have like a couple people who attend that. They packed out the building that we were in to the point that we literally had to keep the door open to let air come.
Amazing.
That's how
Amazing.
it was seated and people were standing.
That's
So
amazing.
they packed that. EPA was like, wow, I'd never seen this many people come. So that was due to intentional engagement, building relationships, outreach, and helping to spread the word. And there were one particular place that's so very important to them is the high school that's there, the St. Stephen's High School. That space for African Americans is like their landmark, and so the biggest thing for that, and it was since the 90s, right? That it's been closed.
Hasn't been used yet.
Yeah. So
Wow.
that is a space that's just sitting there, and
Since the 90s.
yes, and so this is a space that that was everything to that community, and so the biggest thing that we kept hearing during that meeting was like, what are y'all going to do to the high school? What are you doing? We don't want to lose this high school. So come a year later, we have used the committee, and they have been that voice to be a liaison for the community. And each step of the way, we've been very authentic. We've been very transparent and honest along the way of the different sites that were recommended, and also, as Jessi stated, the ones that were priority. And that high school comes up high, and then Turner Mill also comes up under. But just to see the community lean in and engage and want to learn more, and to see those committee members show up all strong, for updates, give their feedback, and then they're also starting to take more of a ownership role. So in this next phase, they'll also be helping with outreach and being in the community and helping us spread the word. And yeah, I think that's a big, huge
Okay.
excitement. I know, I don't know if you could talk about it, but that cultural piece is huge. I don't know if we could talk about that yet, but that's how, just speaking of Berkeley, but you don't want Berkeley to outdo you. So you gotta.
No, I mean, the Tri-County area, we all benefit from each other.
Yeah.
Whether, we think about it or not, we really do. And so knowing that Berkeley is in the middle of this,
Mm-hmm.
1 year in, I definitely will link. They have a Berkeley Means Business. They have their own webpage as well, and so I will link that in the bio for our community, because I want them to see what some information they can potentially be seeing in the next year, right?
Yeah.
And so definitely that helps the community really understand more. So I'll link that for you guys as well, to really kind of help inform y'all. But outside of that, this is really exciting, and I'm excited personally because it's just like I said, I had no idea, but once I became educated on it, I was like, oh, this is so cool. And so I'm really excited to continue working with all of y'all, and helping inform our community, get out there, and all that fun stuff. But before we go our separate way, is there anything else you want to share for the sake of the community in regards to this conversation? I think there's a lot more information to come, so stand by and be listening. But outside of that, is there anything else you want to share?
I would just share with them that if your community means a lot to you, and whether you've lived here a long time or you're new, if your community means a lot to you and you want to be a part of the development that's happening, then we would love to see you on April 22nd at 6 p.m. and have your voice and your presence be in the space, because that's no other way at this point with this particular grant for you to start and be a part of what happens in your community.
That's amazing. Thank you for that. And anything else from y'all? You're just excited to get going and kick off, right? Yeah?
Definitely.
Yep. Come out to the community meeting, April 22nd.
Awesome. And that said, thank you guys so much. I really
Thank you.
appreciate your time and talking about the Brownfield Assessment Grant and what this is going to look like for the next 4 years. And I do expect that we're probably going to have more podcasts on this as well. So be ready for that. But thank you guys so much. And until next time,
Yeah.
thank you.